Okay, so picture this. You're flying over the Peruvian desert, right? Thousands of feet up, and suddenly it's like, bam! The ground below is covered in these massive designs.
It's more than just doodles in the dirt, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're talking a hummingbird bigger than a jumbo jet, a spider that looks like it was spun from, well, the Earth itself. And then there are these geometric shapes so precise, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, you gotta wonder what people first thought when they saw those.
I know, right? I mean, you could be forgiven for thinking you'd stumbled onto some alien landing strip or something, but no, these are the Nazca Lines, and let me tell you, they are shrouded in mystery. Lucky for us, we've got expert speaker here to help us unpack it all.
It's a real pleasure to be here. These lines have puzzled people for close to a century now. There's just something so intriguing about them.
It's like a giant message board left by a long-gone civilization. So since pilots first spotted them back in the 1920s, can you imagine their surprise? Researchers have been busy. They've cataloged over 800 lines, some stretching for miles. And then there are those 300 or so geometric figures. Oh, and we can't forget about the 70 depictions of animals and plants.
All etched into the earth by the Nazca people.
More than 2,000 years ago, which, I mean, just think about that for a second. We're talking about geoglyphs, literally earth glyphs, created long before, well, pretty much everything we take for granted today.
It's incredible, really, the skill, the precision, the sheer scale of it all.
It really is. But that kind of leads us to the big question, doesn't it? We know what they are, these lines, these figures, but why?
The million-dollar question.
Right. What message were the Nazca trying to send?
Well, that's the question that's been keeping archaeologists, astronomers, you name it, busy for decades.
Don't forget about the alien enthusiasts.
Oh, of course, how could we? But seriously, to even start to unravel this mystery, we need to understand the Nazca people themselves and the environment they were living in.
Which, from what I've read, was no walk in the park.
That's putting it mildly. The Nazca lived in one of the driest places on Earth, the southern Peruvian desert.
Talk about harsh conditions.
They're kidding. Water wasn't just important there, it was everything. And the thing is, the Nazca, they didn't just survive in this environment, they thrived.
Really?
Oh yeah. They were masters of hydraulic engineering.
Okay, so they didn't just adapt, they engineered their way to success.
You got it. They created this intricate network of underground aqueducts. Puquios, they're called.
Puquios.
Puquios is a Quechua word. And these puquios were ingenious, really. They allowed the Nazca to tap into water sources hidden deep beneath the desert.
Wow, talk about hidden depths.
I see what you did there.
So this mastery of water, this deep understanding of their environment, that's got to be important for understanding the Nazca Lines, right?
Absolutely. And it leads us to one of the most popular theories about the line's purpose, the water theory.
Okay, so are we talking massive maps to underground wells? Signposts for hidden rivers, maybe?
That's one way to think about it. Some researchers believe these lines might actually map out the flow of seasonal rivers, or even point to the location of those all-important puquios.
So, like, imagine you're walking along one of these lines, right? And you know that somewhere, just beneath your feet, is a source of life-giving water.
Exactly. It's a powerful image, especially in such an arid environment.
No kidding. That kind of connection to something so vital, so hidden, it would hold a lot of power for people.
For sure. And that power, that connection to something unseen, it leads to another interpretation of the water theory one, where these lines weren't just practical markers. They were something more, something almost spiritual.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So less of a map, more of a, what? A giant offering to the gods.
You got it. Remember, the Nazca, they lived in a world where the divine was completely intertwined with nature. Rain wasn't just rain. It was a gift from the gods.
So what better way to ensure a good harvest, a prosperous year, than to create these giant artworks dedicated to those in charge up above? It really makes you think about the lengths people would go to for a little divine intervention. But the water theory, fascinating as it is, it's not the only explanation out there, is it?
Not at all. There are those who believe the Nazcani were looking to the sky for answers as well, but not for rain-bringing gods.
Ah, you mean the folks who think the Nazca Lines are some kind of giant astronomical calendar?
That's the one. The astronomical theory, as it's known, argues that the Nazca Lines weren't just symbolically oriented towards the heavens, they were actually aligned with specific astronomical events.
So solstices, equinoxes, that sort of thing?
Exactly. The movements of the stars as well. It's like, imagine a society so in tune with the cosmos that they literally inscribe their knowledge of the stars onto the very Earth itself.
It's a pretty awe-inspiring thought. But I gotta ask, even if some of the lines do align with celestial events, why make them so big? Wouldn't a smaller, more, I don't know, manageable observatory have done the trick?
That's a question that continues to spark debate. If the main purpose was observation and timekeeping, the scale does seem a little excessive, doesn't it?
Right. It's not like the whole community could gather around one line to observe a solstice.
Exactly. Which is why some researchers have proposed a kind of hybrid theory, if you will.
Okay, so combining the practical with the ceremonial.
Precisely. Imagine, for instance, a procession along one of these lines on the winter solstice, perfectly aligned with the rising sun. It wouldn't just be about observation, it would be an experience, a way of connecting with the cosmos on a deeper level.
I can see how that would be pretty powerful, walking a path literally aligned with the stars. But we've talked a lot about the why of the Nazca Lines, but the how is equally mind-boggling. I mean, we're talking about incredibly precise designs created way before things like, GPS or even the wheel for that matter. So how did they do it?
It's a question that never ceases to amaze, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're right, the Nazca, they didn't have access to any of the tools we take for granted today.
Right. No drones, no fancy surveying equipment, nothing.
It was all about ingenuity, careful planning, and a deep understanding of their surroundings.
So what, like stone tools and string and a whole lot of patience?
Pretty much. Evidence points to the use of simple tools like wooden stakes, ropes, measuring cords, you name it. And they probably used some kind of grid system to maintain accuracy over such vast distances.
It just boggles the mind, the level of planning involved. Imagine laying out even a small section of those lines using nothing but ropes and stakes.
Oh, and don't forget, they weren't just drawing lines in the sand. They were actually removing the top layer of rock to reveal the lighter earth beneath, creating that contrast that makes the lines visible from above.
It's like a massive earthwork project. And then for centuries, these lines just lay hidden, forgotten by the world, swallowed by the immensity of the desert.
It makes you wonder what else is out there, just waiting to be rediscovered.
I know, right? But discovering something like the Nazca Lines, as amazing as it is, it also presents a whole new challenge. How to preserve something so fragile for future generations.
Especially with things like tourism and the elements constantly at play.
Exactly. I mean, even walking on the lines, even with the best intentions, it can cause damage.
Right. And then there's wind erosion, flash floods, even just the slow creep of vegetation, all taking their toll.
It's like trying to preserve a sand mandala in a hurricane.
That's one way to put it. And that's precisely why the Nazca Lines were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994.
A recognition of their global importance, not just for Peru, but for all of humanity. So what's being done to make sure these lines don't just vanish one day?
Well, for starters, limiting access is key. Designated viewing platforms have been set up so visitors can appreciate the scale of the lines without actually, walking all over them.
Smart.
There's also a lot of research going on into conservation techniques, things like using geotextiles to stabilize the soil and prevent further erosion.
Okay, so it's not just about keeping people off the lines, it's about actively working to combat those environmental factors as well.
That's right. But preservation goes beyond just the physical, doesn't it?
You're talking about understanding the cultural significance of the lines.
Absolutely. Educating visitors about the Nazca people, their history, their belief, it's crucial. When you understand the ingenuity and the sheer effort that went into creating these lines, you see them differently.
They become more than just, lines in the sand.
Exactly. You start to appreciate them as a testament to human creativity, to our enduring fascination with the world around us.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? I mean, we're talking about something created with sticks and stones, essentially, that's managed to survive for centuries. It's a real testament to, Nazca's ingenuity, their artistry. And, we've explored all these different theories from the practical, like the water theory, to the astronomical, even the, let's just say out there theories about aliens and such. But I gotta ask, for someone who's just learning about the Nazca Lines, what do you think is the most important thing to take away from all of this?
That's a good question. I think, for me, it's the mystery. The fact that we may never fully understand what the Nazca Lines really meant to the people who created them.
We've got all these theories, these glimpses into their world, but the full picture, that remains elusive.
Exactly. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to not have all the answers.
It's kind of refreshing, actually. In this day and age where information is everywhere, there's something to be said for a little mystery.
I agree. I think the Nazca Lines, they invite us to do more than just find answers. They challenge us to use our imaginations, to see the world through the eyes of a culture that was deeply connected to the earth and the sky.
To step outside our own, well, modern way of thinking.
Exactly. And, sometimes just asking the questions is just as important as finding the answers, wouldn't you say?
Couldn't agree more. The Nazca Lines might always be a bit of an enigma, but trying to understand them, piecing together the clues, that's what makes them so fascinating.
Sure.
Well, on that note, I think we've done a pretty good job of diving deep into the enigma of the Nazca Lines for today.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And for our listeners, if you're as intrigued by these mysterious geoglyphs as we are, do yourself a favor. Look up some pictures online after the show. You won't be disappointed.
Seeing those lines stretching across the desert, it's really something else.
It really makes you realize that the past, well, it's not as distant as we sometimes think. There are still traces of it out there waiting to be discovered.
Waiting to tell their stories.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive for today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, never lose your sense of wonder.